On this episode of the Leadership Hustle, we're going to discuss how to bring the intelligence outside of your company inside the company sooner rather than later. Hello, and welcome to the Leadership Hustle for executives whose companies are growing fast and need leaders who are ready. Hi there, and welcome back to this episode of the Leadership Hustle. I'm Andrea Fredrickson, and I'm joined with my co-host, Michelle Hill.
Hello.
And today's topic is being recorded during what I would call the early to beginning time where we do a lot of strategic work. We've already been doing strategic planning meetings with clients for 2 months already. And so it's now the middle of September and people are going to want their plans and their goals set up. But the topic that we're going to bring up is really about how strategic information is not just the responsibility of the senior leadership team.
Correct.
So as we were getting ready to talk about this, or we were making preparations for this podcast, I had noticed that when we were getting together with some of our senior leadership teams and we were talking about, what's going on in the industry, what's going on in our environment, what's going on in the economy. We were doing the pest analysis and the environmental scan and things like that. And they would look at me a little bit like, I'm like, I did give you this assignment, right? And I'm like, well, yeah. So they hadn't always done all of their pre-work. But I think that as I dug a little deeper, they were saying, I just don't have time. I'm like, this is not an event, right? And so we wanted to talk about this as how do we make the environmental scan something that's just part of everybody's day and everybody's responsibility, because our individual contributors are working with vendors and suppliers and customers.
Lots of information available to them.
Yes. And if they were asked the question, they would tell you, oh, yeah, I'm noticing that it's taking a lot longer to get trucks to be able to deliver, pick up. I'm noticing that customers are taking longer to pay, right? Or we're noticing that this vendor has a big inventory or supply of product. And it's like, this is unique or abnormal for folks. And so just give me your thoughts as it relates to this, Michelle. What's going on here?
I was just with a leadership group yesterday, and they are getting ready to get into their strategic planning. Okay. And so I talked a little bit about the importance of, before they meet as a group, they really need to explore all their resources. And a big piece of that is going to their employees and what is going on, what are the employees noticing, even having the employees as they're talking to vendors, customers, and so forth, just and giving them some open-ended questions, but finding out what's going on in their world. What are things that are happening? What are some of their initiatives? What are they working on?
Right.
What are some of the things that they're finding challenging or they're starting to notice change? So we can get a bigger picture of what's happening in the world immediately around us, right? Because if it's a customer, a vendor, that's right outside our door. And the better we understand what's happening in their world, we can then maybe even uncover some things that are happening in ours. Right. And so not only just asking them, what are they noticing, but actually, going and I don't want to say investigating, but asking the questions so they can come back, and then they're having a conversation with their employees, getting that information. So when they come into their first meeting, they've already been having conversations themselves. They're also engaging their employees of, this is why we're going to be going into strategic planning. And I want your perspective on things. I want your ideas on things. While at the same time, I want to understand more about what's happening with our, the customers you're working with, the vendors you're working with, the employees, maybe if you're talking to managers. So you're engaging them before it's happening, and they get to feel a part of it. So there's kind of a win in here. You're possibly gaining some insights from different lenses that you normally wouldn't have.
Right.
And they're also now, as employees, they get to feel like they have some input, some say or some guidance in what's happening in our industry right now.
Right.
And there's a lot of valuable information. So as that leadership group, as people are talking, don't just take the first answer. Ask more questions to understand and dive a little deeper, because you'll uncover more there as well, which will be helpful when you go into your meeting with this group.
Right. With all of our different tools as it relates to research, all the AI tools and things like that, I'm still a fan of doing multiple kinds of research.
Oh, yes.
So if we're going to do, whether we use a chat or a Copilot or any of those other tools that can gather research, I think there's also the people that our people are talking to on a day-to-day basis. They're going to give you some uniqueness, because it's not about the world necessarily, but it might be a region.
Correct.
Or it might be a very specific customer or a very specific vendor. And so teaching our frontline employees or anybody who has contact, I would say, with the outside world, right? What are some of the things that are happening? So I love some of those questions, Michelle, that you were saying. Tell me what is new or unique as it relates to your business. And they might be like, I don't know, everything seems the same. And that's fine, right? But that's the note you write down, right?
Yes.
But there might be saying, I'm also working with one of your competitors, and your competitor is telling us or is doing this. Man, that's so helpful for us. That was a big change for us.
Well, that was one thing I mentioned, was asking, so different other vendors that you have. Let's say you're talking to a customer. Other vendors you have, what are some other vendors similar to us that, what are they doing that you really value and appreciate that we're not doing?
Right.
It's getting some of that information too. What's going on in the different conversations that you're having.
Right. And different people are going to have different perspectives, but it's because it impacts them in different ways.
Correct.
And not, the further we get away from the day-to-day, so those of us that are doing strategic work tend to not have as much real hands-on life experience as the person who is on the phone, responding back to the emails, having the text conversation, out on the dock, wherever.
Customer complaints. I mean, you name it. It's they're not as in, things that they have that experience with is from possibly many, many years ago. So this group I was with, they all have a lot of years in the business.
And because they have all these years, they're very wise.
Yes, and they're very removed, and that. But they've elevated, which is great. But it is making sure that we are connecting with everyone in the organization and outside of it, just to get those perspectives that we're not going to have as much as we used to.
So let's go back to the year COVID became a big part of everybody's life. So was that 2020?
It was 2020.
2020. And I remember working with a group, and so our normal quarterly meeting was always the first week of the next month. So quarter ended March 30th. So the world in our space shut down around the 13th of March. That was when
somewhere in
Omaha shut down.
Somewhere in that time frame, yeah.
And then we had a meeting 3 weeks later, and there was a discussion about whether or not we should have that. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, we need to have this quarterly update because we just now figured out that this is something. And what does this mean? And then we're going to have to do more check-ins.
More micro.
Yes, all these little bursts of conversation. And prior to that, it probably wasn't as obvious to people to do the same thing that we were just talking about from a strategic planning perspective at that time as having an update quarterly, because the world shifts minute to minute, right?
Correct.
And so if we are asking the people on our teams that are outside the world facing, maybe they're having conversations at the soccer field. Maybe they're having conversations at the basketball game because they're just happen to be talking about what they do for a living, right? And they're just talking about, we're really struggling with this. It's like, oh, really? So you're gathering intel, but you're bringing it forth because the month before we do our quarterly update, we need to be gathering what that information is so that other people on the team that gets to make decisions can start doing some research too.
Correct.
Like, what do we need to do? So this is an ongoing thing. And people are like, Andrew, you're just making this too complicated. I'm like, okay, here's what happens if you find out something that you didn't know because you did this. Like, what happens? And people were like, well, then I can fix it, right? Without that information, you don't get to fix it until it's too late.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So sooner rather than later, right? But just like you said at the very beginning of this, if we are having all of our employees kind of looking at the horizon all the time, what's going on out there? What are people saying? What should we be asking? What are we hearing? And we don't know if it's true or false, meaning they're not lying to us, but does it mean, hey, go look here.
Yes.
Go pay attention.
Yes, there's something going on here. We don't, what was shared was from a different lens. I mean, there's some of that information.
It could be isolated. It could be
Correct.
Much bigger than
Correct.
that.
But it gives you those insights.
But we
for
can
sure.
ask people to help participate. It doesn't have to be a big laborious process. It
No.
simply is, as you are having conversations, be on the lookout for and do some intentional checking.
Questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, this gets back to as leaders in the organization, as we are working closer and closer to the front line, after we have what's our plan for the year? What's our plan for the quarter or for the 3 years, whatever, however
Right.
long people look out. Everyone does things a little differently. But helping people understand, it's important as a team on the front line, we have got to prioritize what are we doing this quarter and taking time to identify what are those key things I should be working on in addition to like those initiatives and so forth.
Right.
And giving them a little bit of time to think further out because otherwise we find they're in the weeds day to day. But if we're in the weeds day to day, we're just teaching them to be in the weeds day to day.
Correct.
And helping them prioritize, spending a little bit as we go into, the 4 quadrants, that quadrant of important but not urgent, quadrant 2, right?
Right.
High
payoff.
Yes, this is where our high payoff activities are. And everyone in the organization should understand what it is they do and how that's contributing to the bigger picture and making sure they have time to really pull back and see that, have conversations with their manager
Right.
and plan appropriately for it, whatever that is, because it's going to vary from person to person. Everyone has different goals and responsibilities based off of their roles.
And their availability. And it's a lot easier to make a course correction sooner.
Yes.
Rather than, oh my gosh, we didn't see this coming because now the machine we just bought, this $3 million machine we just bought is no longer going to be valuable because we didn't see this other thing coming. Or we just hired a whole lot of people and now because of this, we're going to need to do through, some attrition and we're going to be doing some layoffs.
Yes.
Or we didn't see, it's like, we could have been managing this differently.
Yes. Or sales have been slow the first 3 quarters. So now we're going to slam a bunch of people that don't normally do sales out to do some sales
Right.
to try to make up last quarter.
Right.
And I was like, good luck with that.
And how's operations going to handle that because we didn't back up the process? Or, there's so many things, course correction early is a whole lot easier. And I think that it's not different, whether we're talking about strategic plan for a company and what direction they're going versus an employee. It's like they only have one conversation per year about their performance. I'm like, no, let's do adjustments. Let's reward certain behaviors. Let's course correct as we need to. Let's
Correct.
be clear about where we're going and why we're getting there sooner rather than later. It applies across
It does.
all of these environments.
It does.
So in this concept, as I said earlier, we were talking about it is truly the midst of strategic planning season, that most people are getting ready to do budgets and things like that.
Yes, I hear a lot of budgets.
It's now time to start putting into process, getting other people involved. And so it's not just, we do this every fall, just like when we do benefits, and things like that. It's like, no, this is just part of our routine. We're always gathering this intel. Where do we put it so that people can look at it the month before they do their quarterly updates? And if there's something that's really crazy that they're starting to see, it's like, bring it up earlier. It's okay. But if we don't have the information, there's no way that we can do it.
Correct. It moves us a little closer, I think, to being proactive versus reactive.
Oh,
I mean, there's so much we can't control and so many things we have to react to that are out of our control. that we have to identify and look at what are those little things we can control or at least influence, so we're a little more proactive.
Yeah, leadership is not the only group of folks who can be gathering intel that is valuable. And so for those of you that are listening to this particular episode of this podcast, if you found this valuable, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't ever miss another episode.